December 16th, again, I was talking about my father's experiment. So the GSR tests our skin response, which is kind of like our sweat pores and our heart rate and everything. It really tells us about that. It was biofeedback was the science that he was doing, which is kind of a little bit passe now, but now they're doing neurofeedback, so it's actually quite similar, I think. So the biofeedback, you have your fingers on this little thing. It's called a GSR, and it goes with sound and depending on if you're excited or calm, if your heart rate's high or low, if you're sweating or if you're not sweating. And so he would stick our hand in a bucket of ice water, and then we would see if we could get the woo, because that's what's supposed to happen the minute your hand goes in the ice water, to go woo, even while our hand is in the ice water. So that was a scientific experiment that was done on me as a child. And then I went into the Dartmouth lab, and a scientific experiment had to do with a red light, green light, and yellow light. And I was supposed to tap a space bar at certain times and not tap it at other times. So that's also an experiment. And they did it with a bunch of people to see what would happen. We can look up psychology experiments, and also I have ecology and other books to read little bits to you, so we can look up other experiments. All this time I'm talking is counting as science time, because these are kinds of things teachers would say to you. Okay. All right. Psychologist can't see everyone's behavior, so they take a sample. Talked about alcoholics. Okay. So this is lesson 2. Your obedient subject. This is a sidebar. People or other animals who take part in psychological research are generally called subjects. So I guess I was a subject. However, some psychologists object to the connotations of the word subject. It suggests that means the connotation is the meaning of, or the implication of, the feeling of that word. It might feel like it's derogatory or rude or mean or looking down upon somebody, derogatory. Okay, and we can count that as English. It suggests that people are subjected to the whims of the researcher, much in the way that the king's subjects are under his control. The king's control. The word subject may also perpetuate, meaning continue, an impersonal attitude toward the people who take part in the research. Instead of saying they interviewed 2 men and 2 women yesterday, the psychologist sometimes catches themselves saying, I ran 4 subjects yesterday. As a result, some psychologists would like to stay away from the word subject, or at least for humans, and to replace it with a less objectionable word as participant or such. And I have another note up here. Pavlov. So Pavlov was a famous researcher, and he researched his famous one is called Pavlov's dogs. And Pavlov is Pavlov. And he would be in any of your psychology final exams in this level. So it was about dog salivation. And again, I guess this is something you could do with your pets, and this could be part of a human behavior, animal behavior, psychology research. This could be at one of your labs. So Pavlov, and his first name was Ivan Pavlov, did research on lots of things, but this particular one he's super famous for is Pavlov's dogs. So he, as far as I understand and remember it, I'm not going to read it, he gave the dogs a bone and rang a bell or some kind of treat, and they would salivate, and he was, I think, measuring their salivation. And then he started ringing the bell without giving them the treat, and they would still salivate. So that response is called Pavlovian response, I think. So anyway, I'm going to read this thing. It's just under a title called Serendipity, and then we can look up the word serendipity, and that can count for English. Sometimes a psychologist's insight arrived by accident, as an outgrowth of another work that the psychologist happens to be doing. For example, the Russian psychologist Ivan Pavlov was studying the process of salivation in dogs when they were fed. He noticed after a while the dogs began to salivate even before they were fed. Oh, look at this. The experiment's different than what I said. As soon as they saw the experimenter who was about to feed them. This unexpected observation led Pavlov to discover the type of learning known as classical conditioning, An incident such as this, finding something you're not looking for, is called serendipity. Well, that's interesting. So I totally remembered his experiment differently. So he just accidentally found out that when my dogs know it's dinner time, I think they start salivating. And when they see me at around dinner time, they start letting me know it's time for dinner. So that's a conditional, classical conditioning. So a conditioned response. So here I have a note on the side, psychoanalytic identification. A boy does because he sees his father doing it. Oh, okay, psychoanalytic identification. This is called social learning, theorists, social reinforcement, and modeling. So social learning, social reinforcement, and modeling. A boy does it because he sees his father doing it. Now that can also be something negative. That could be shoveling the driveway, going to work, having a good work ethic, or being an alcoholic, or, eating food as a way of coping. You can see our parents doing things that we might model that aren't healthy. The study, systematic, thorough, well-organized search for facts. That's systematic studying. Objective is based on careful observations. That is different from observers, that many different observers can agree upon. So if it's objective, we don't have our emotion connected to it. Okay. We did subjects, we did this. Okay. So, the psychologist's choice of a subject, which we have the word back here, is also likely to be dictated by convenience. Okay, so we read that, psychology, college students and psychology students. It's not too surprising because most psychological researchers work in colleges and universities, which my dad did, especially those taking psychology courses, and they provide the most readily available supply of subjects. The heavy reliance on college students as subjects presents a certain problem, however, because it's biased. You have only a certain part of the population who, A, went to college, and B, is studying certain things or friends with people who are studying certain things. So you're low, and you're a certain age group, so you're not studying all age groups. You're not studying the 80-year-old and the 2-year-old. Okay. Because most college students, and in the time this was written, most college students were young, white, and middle class. Now, I think high schools try to make everybody go to college, and that's quite interesting concept with that, not having any plumbers and electricians and people that are really needed in this society to function. Because most college students are young, white, and middle class, and then they're all getting out of there with debt and not always finishing, no matter whether they're white and middle class or any class and any color. It may not always be possible to generalize from the behavior of college students to the behavior of people from other segments of society. For example, a large number of studies have shown that people often devote a great deal of effort to making sure their behaviors seem consistent to themselves and others. As a result, these studies' consistency has been viewed by many psychologists as a fundamental motive of human beings. As a result, these studies, consistency has been viewed by many psychologists as a fundamental motive of human beings. So maybe you are trying to behave a certain way to be like everyone else, and that's one of our fundamental motives. But this conclusion needs to be taken with a grain or two of salt. In fact, a large majority of studies demonstrating the consistency motive were conducted by college students. It may well be the case that in the course of writing the paper and giving class presentations, students are taught that consistency is a virtue and inconsistency is a vice. Now, I've noticed that in high school and college teachers, they want you to give the answer they want you to give, and they'll give an opinion, and they want you to give their opinion back to them. And if you don't give their opinion back to them, they don't give you a great grade. So that's very interesting. So inconsistency is a vice. As a result, college students may especially likely behave in a consistent way with experiments. I also think in my generation that people who thought they were supposed to go to college thought they had to go to college, and now they're really pushing it so that everybody thinks they have to go to college, and people think if they don't, there's some sort of bad choice or failure. But then they're now encouraging gap years. When Allie was about to go to college, she said, basically, if somebody doesn't go, they're a loser that first year. But then they started taking gap years, and people started realizing for their psychological and mental health and stability, some gap time was good, because otherwise they were churning through high school doing all these AP classes which get them college credit, and then jumping into college and then having their nervous breakdowns. So, as a result, college students may be especially likely to behave consistently in experiments. If the same experiments were done with people who were not college students, considerably less evidence for the fundamental human motive of consistency might be found. That's a might be found. So they're saying if you didn't just do these experiments with college students, you might have not find so much of people trying to be the same as others, but you might find it. I think we have, different groups of people now in this society, in this era, who have very strong opinions on one side or the other of many things, and they're strong and maybe consistent with their view, but they're not feeling pulled to have the view of the other people because their view is strong their way. Okay, so I'm going to stop here. I'm at 10 minutes. Okay, so you guys, over 10 minutes, so you've got 15 minutes in this view, and 5 minutes in the last view makes 15 minutes, and then talk about it with your mom, and that's 30 minutes total.